It was a quiet afternoon inside a small coffee shop. The kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Soft music drifted through the air. The low hum of conversations blended with the sound of coffee machines steaming milk. Outside, sunlight poured through the windows, casting warm shadows across the wooden floor. People sat scattered around the room, some working on laptops, others laughing with friends, a few simply enjoying the calm. Everything felt normal, safe, predictable. In the far corner, near the window, sat an older man. Alone. Dressed simply. Nothing expensive. Nothing that demanded attention. At first glance, he looked like anyone else, just another quiet customer passing time with a cup of coffee. But there was something different. Something subtle. The way he sat, straight, composed. The way his eyes moved, calm, aware, observant. Not distracted. Not restless. Focused. Like a man who had seen more than most people in that room ever would. The barista called out names. Cups clinked. Chairs shifted. Life continued without interruption. No one paid him any attention. No one thought twice. And that's exactly why what happened next caught everyone completely off guard. Because moments like this don't come with warnings. They don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly and change everything in an instant. Near the entrance, the door suddenly opened. Not gently, but with force. A sharp sound cut through the calm atmosphere. A few heads turned, then went back to normal. But not his. The older man looked up. Not startled. Not confused. Just aware. Like he already understood something no one else did. And in that moment, without a single word being spoken, the entire atmosphere began to shift. Because someone had just walked in, who was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The door hadn't just opened. It had announced itself. A sharp, aggressive push that didn't match the calm rhythm of the coffee shop. For a brief second, conversations paused. Eyes flicked toward the entrance. Then, like most people do, they went back to their own worlds. Except one. The older man in the corner. He didn't look away. He watched. Carefully. A uniformed police officer stepped inside. Mid-40s. Tall. Broad shoulders. Heavy footsteps. The kind of presence that didn't ask for attention. It took it. His jaw was tight. His expression already irritated, like the day had been building up to something, and he was ready to release it on whoever came next. He scanned the room quickly. Not observing. Judging. The barista greeted him politely. "Good afternoon, sir." He didn't respond. Just walked forward. Boots hitting the floor harder than necessary. Each step carrying tension. People felt it, even if they didn't fully understand it. The officer moved past tables, brushing shoulders slightly, not bothering to apologize. Then it happened. As he turned sharply toward the counter, his arm struck the edge of the older man's table. The coffee cup tipped. Spilled. Dark liquid spread across the surface, dripping slowly to the floor. A small accident. Nothing serious. The kind of thing that normally ends with a quick, sorry, and maybe an awkward smile. But this wasn't normal. The officer stopped. Slowly turned. Looked directly at the older man. The room felt tighter. Like something invisible had just locked into place. "Watch where you're going," the officer snapped. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the noise. A few nearby customers turned again. This time, they didn't look away as quickly. The older man stood up calmly. No rush. No panic. He glanced briefly at the spilled coffee, then back at the officer. "I apologize," he said quietly. His tone was even. Respectful. Controlled. No attitude. No resistance. For a moment, it should have ended there. That was the exit. The easy way out. But the officer didn't take it. Instead, he stepped closer. Invading space. Towering slightly over the man. "You think that's enough?" he said, his voice tightening. The cafe went quieter. Not silent, but different. People weren't just hearing anymore. They were listening. The older man didn't step back. Didn't raise his hands. Didn't argue. He simply stood there, grounded. Still. I didn't mean to cause trouble, he replied. Same calm tone. Same control. And somehow, that made it worse. Because the officer wasn't looking for resolution. He was looking for reaction. And he wasn't getting one. His eyes narrowed. You people always say that, he muttered. That line hung in the air. Uncomfortable. Heavy. Now more people were watching. Phones slowly shifted in hands. Not obvious. But ready. The tension was building, quietly, steadily. The older man's expression didn't change. Not offended. Not angry. Just steady. Like he had already decided something. The officer tilted his head slightly. Studying him. Trying to figure him out. But there was nothing to grab onto. No fear. No aggression. No weakness. Just calm. Unshaken calm. And for someone already on edge, that kind of calm can feel like a challenge. The officer took another step forward. Now close enough that there was no space left between them. You think you're better than me, he said, voice low. The question didn't even make sense. But it wasn't meant to. It was pressure. A test. A push. Waiting for a crack. Any crack. But the man didn't give him one. Instead, he simply looked at him. Directly. Not disrespectfully. Not submissively. Just present. Aware. And that silence. It spoke louder than any argument ever could. Around them, the cafe had changed. No one was pretending anymore. No one was ignoring it. Every eye was now locked on the two men. Because deep down, everyone could feel it. This wasn't over. Not even close. This was just the beginning. And if the officer kept going, he was about to cross a line he wouldn't be able to come back from. The silence didn't break. It stretched. Thick. Uncomfortable. Watching. The kind of silence where everyone feels something is about to go wrong, but no one moves. The officer's jaw tightened as he stared at the older man. Waiting. Expecting something. An apology with fear. A defensive reaction. A spark he could grab onto. But he got nothing. Just calm. Steady, controlled calm. And that made everything worse. You got a problem, the officer said, his voice louder now. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone near the back slowly reached for their phone, then paused. The older man didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at the officer, not challenging, not avoiding. Just present. I already apologized, he said quietly. No emotion. No tension. Just truth. The officer let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, I heard you. He took a step to the side, circling slightly now. Like he was trying to provoke movement. You think that makes it okay, he added. Still nothing. No reaction. The older man remained still, hands relaxed at his sides. No clenched fists. No defensive posture. Just balance. Control. And that silence. It started pulling attention from every corner of the cafe. More people turned. More eyes locked in. Even those who had tried to ignore it couldn't anymore. Because the energy had changed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something else. The officer's voice rose again. You people always act like you did nothing wrong. That line landed harder this time. Not just aggressive, but personal. A few customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Someone near the counter whispered, "This isn't right." But no one stepped in. Not yet. Because moments like this create hesitation, fear, uncertainty. The older man still didn't react. Didn't defend himself. Didn't argue back. And somehow, that calmness was louder than anything the officer was saying. It was controlled. Measured. Like every second was being chosen carefully. The officer leaned in closer. Now only inches away. You deaf or something, he snapped. The man blinked once. Slow. Deliberate. I heard you, he replied. Same tone. Same calm. That was it. Nothing more. And that's when something shifted inside the officer. You could see it. The frustration. The loss of control. Because he wasn't winning this. There was no dominance. No fear to feed on. Just a wall of quiet composure. And for someone used to authority, that kind of resistance, silent resistance, feels like disrespect. The officer stepped back suddenly, ran a hand across his face, then laughed again, louder this time. "You standing there like you're above this," he said. His voice echoed more now. The entire cafe was listening. "You think you're smarter than everyone here?" Still nothing. The older man's posture didn't change, didn't flinch, didn't shift weight, just stood there, like none of this was affecting him. And that made it worse. Because now the officer wasn't just irritated. He was embarrassed. People were watching, judging, and he could feel it. Phones were definitely out now. Not hidden anymore. Small movements. Subtle angles. But clear. This moment was being recorded. And instead of stepping back, the officer leaned into it. Harder. "You know what I think," he said, pointing a finger close to the man's chest. "I think you're pretending." A pause. "I think you're acting tough." Another step forward. "I think you need to be reminded how things work." The air in the cafe felt tight now. Compressed. Like it was holding its breath. The older man finally moved. Just slightly. Not backward. Not defensive. He adjusted his sleeve. Smooth. Controlled. Then he looked directly into the officer's eyes. Not challenging. Not afraid. Just clear. "I don't want any trouble," he said. The words were simple. But the delivery, unshaken. And something about that sentence, that calm refusal to engage, hit the officer harder than any insult could. Because it removed the fight. And without a fight, there was nothing left but his own actions. His own choices. And now everyone was watching those choices unfold. The officer's expression hardened. Decision made. Impulse taking over. Emotion winning. "You already are trouble," he said coldly. A few people near the front stood up slightly. Not stepping in, but ready. Tension had peaked. There was no misunderstanding anymore. No confusion. Everyone could feel it. The line was right there. One step away. And the officer was about to take it. The older man didn't move. Didn't brace. Didn't prepare. Just stood there. Completely still. Completely aware. And that's what made the next moment even more shocking. Because he saw it coming. And still, he chose not to stop it. And then, the officer crossed a line he could never uncross. For a split second, everything slowed down. The officer's hand moved. Fast, sharp, uncontrolled. And before anyone could react, it landed. A loud crack echoed through the cafe. The sound cut through the air like glass shattering. No music. No voices. No movement. Just silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Every single person froze. Eyes wide. Breath held. The moment didn't just happen. It stopped everything. The older man's head turned slightly from the impact. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just enough to show what had happened. A red mark began to form across his face. Clear. Undeniable. Real. A few people gasped. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God!" But no one moved. Because no one expected it to go that far. And now that it had, no one knew what would happen next. The officer stood there, chest rising slightly. Adrenaline. Impulse. The kind of decision that feels powerful for 1 second, and irreversible the next. For a brief moment, even he seemed to realize it. But it was too late. The line had been crossed. And everyone in that room knew it. Phones were no longer hidden. They were up. Recording. Capturing everything. Because this wasn't just tension anymore. This was something serious. Something that couldn't be ignored. All eyes shifted back to the older man. Waiting. Expecting. A reaction. Anger. Retaliation. Anything. Because that's what makes sense, right? You get hit. You respond. You defend yourself. You push back. That's what everyone thought would happen. That's what the officer expected. That's what the room was bracing for. But instead, nothing. The man didn't swing. Didn't shout. Didn't even step back. For a second, he remained exactly as he was. Still. Grounded. Unmoved. Then slowly, very slowly, he turned his head back, facing forward again. His expression didn't change. No rage. No panic. No humiliation. Just calm. The kind of calm that didn't make sense in a moment like this. And that's what made it powerful. Because it wasn't forced. It wasn't weakness. It was control. Complete control. The officer blinked. Confused. That wasn't the reaction he wanted. That wasn't the reaction he expected. You got nothing to say now, he muttered. But his voice had changed. Less confident. Less certain. Because something about the situation had shifted. And he could feel it. The older man looked at him. Directly. Steady. And for the first time since this started, he moved. Not aggressively. Not suddenly. Just a small, deliberate motion. He straightened his posture. Adjusted his sleeve again. Almost like the slap hadn't affected him at all. Almost like he was giving the officer one last chance. The room felt heavier now. More intense. Because everyone could sense it. This moment meant something. More than just a confrontation. More than just a mistake. This was a turning point. The officer shifted his weight. Glanced briefly around the cafe. Noticing the phones. The eyes. The attention. The judgment. And suddenly, he wasn't fully in control anymore. But instead of stepping back, he doubled down. You think standing there makes you strong, he said. Trying to regain authority. Trying to pull the moment back in his favor. But it wasn't working. Because the power had already started to move. Quietly. Subtly. Away from him. And toward the man he had just struck. The older man's voice finally broke the silence. Low. Calm. Controlled. I asked you to stop. A pause. Not loud. But every single person heard it. The officer scoffed. Or what? He said. But there was hesitation now. A crack. Small, but real. The man held his gaze. Unblinking. I wasn't trying to protect myself, he continued. Another pause. Longer this time. I was trying to protect you. The words didn't hit immediately. They didn't need to. Because the tone carried everything. Not a threat. Not anger. Something else. Something deeper. And that's what made the officer hesitate. Just for a second. Just enough for doubt to enter. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like a normal situation anymore. Something was off. Something he didn't understand. And around them, the atmosphere had completely changed. The cafe no longer felt like a cafe. It felt like a scene. A moment suspended in time. Waiting. Building. Right before something bigger. The officer opened his mouth to respond. But stopped. Because outside, through the glass windows, movement had begun. Subtle at first. Almost unnoticeable. But real. And whatever was coming, was already too close to stop. Because the moment that slap landed, everything changed. And now, there was no going back. For a moment, no one spoke. The air inside the cafe felt different now. Heavier. Like something unseen had entered the room. Not loud. Not obvious. But present. The officer stood still, trying to hold on to control. Trying to convince himself nothing had changed. That this was still his moment. Still his authority. But something didn't feel right anymore. And deep down, he knew it. The older man remained calm. Exactly as before. No anger. No reaction. Just quiet awareness. He slowly reached for a napkin on the table. pressed it lightly against the spilled coffee, then set it down again. Small movements, deliberate, controlled, like everything he did had purpose, like nothing was wasted. His eyes shifted briefly toward the window, just for a second, then back to the officer. That glance didn't go unnoticed, not by the officer, and not by the people watching, because it felt like a signal, like he knew something others didn't. "You think this is funny?" the officer snapped, trying to break the silence again. His voice wasn't as steady now. There was tension behind it. Uncertainty. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow breath. Measured. Calm. Then finally spoke. "I told you already," he said. His voice was low. Even. "I tried to stop you." A pause. The officer let out a forced laugh. "Yeah. And what exactly were you going to do?" he said. Still pushing. Still trying to regain ground. But it didn't land the same anymore. Because the energy had shifted. Completely. The man looked at him again. Not aggressively. Not defensively. Just directly. "I wasn't trying to stop you for me," he continued. Another pause. Longer this time. The room leaned into it. Listening. "I was trying to stop you from making a mistake you can't fix." That line settled into the room. Heavy. Uncomfortable. A few people exchanged looks. Because now, this didn't sound like a warning out of fear. It sounded like a warning out of certainty. The officer's jaw tightened again. But this time, there was hesitation behind it. "What are you talking about?" he said. Less confident now. Less aggressive. More defensive. The man didn't respond immediately. He simply glanced toward the window again. Longer this time. And now others followed his gaze. At first, nothing. Just the street outside. Cars passing. People walking. Normal. But then, something changed. A vehicle slowed down near the curb. Then another. Dark. Unmarked. No lights. No sirens. Just presence. Subtle. Quiet. But intentional. Inside the cafe, no one said a word. But everyone felt it. The shift. The build. Something was coming. The officer noticed it too. His eyes flicked toward the window. Then back to the man. Trying to read him. Trying to understand. But there was nothing to read. No panic. No urgency. No fear. Just calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from guessing, but from knowing. "You think someone's coming to help you," the officer said, forcing a smirk. Trying one last time to regain control. But his voice gave him away. It wasn't solid anymore. There was doubt in it now. The man's expression didn't change. "I don't need help," he replied. Simple. Clear. Another pause. "But you might." That sentence hit differently. Not loud. Not aggressive. But final. Like a door quietly closing. The officer swallowed. Almost unnoticeable. But it happened. Because now, the situation didn't feel like his anymore. The cafe door hadn't opened again yet. No one had walked in. No one had announced anything. And still, the pressure was rising. Invisible. But real. People shifted in their seats. Not leaving. Not interrupting. Just watching. Because instinct told them. This moment mattered. Something bigger was unfolding. Outside, the vehicles had fully stopped now. Engines still running. Doors still closed. Waiting. The man adjusted his sleeve once more. That same calm motion. Like a routine. Like control. Then he looked back at the officer one last time. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. But with something else. Understanding. "I gave you every chance," he said quietly. No emotion. Just fact. The officer opened his mouth. But nothing came out. Because for the first time since this started, he didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to do. The roles had shifted. Completely. And he could feel it. He just didn't understand it yet. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough to know. He had misjudged something. Badly. Very badly. Outside. A car door finally opened. Soft. Almost silent. But inside the cafe, it sounded like a signal. Because whatever was about to happen next was already in motion. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. Because the real danger was never the man standing in front of him. It was everything the officer couldn't see. Until now. The sound came quietly. But it carried. A car door closing outside. Soft. Controlled. Intentional. Inside the cafe, no one moved. But every ear caught it. Every instinct sharpened. Because by now, everyone felt it. Something was about to happen. The officer glanced toward the window again. Longer this time. His confidence, once loud and aggressive, was now thinning. Cracking. Piece by piece. Outside, the first man stepped into view. Dark suit. Clean posture. Focused expression. Not a civilian. Not random. Purposeful. Then another. And another. They moved quickly, but not rushed. Disciplined. Like a team that had done this many times before. The officer's eyes narrowed. Confusion. Then concern. The cafe door opened again. This time, slowly. No force. No noise. Just control. Two men entered first. Scanning the room in seconds. Noticing everything. Ignoring nothing. Their presence alone shifted the atmosphere. Not loud. Not aggressive. But absolute. The kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself. One of them spoke, voice firm and clear. Everyone remain where you are. No panic in his tone. No chaos. Just instruction. And people listened. Phones lowered slightly, but didn't disappear. Because now, this had become something bigger than anyone expected. The officer straightened. Instinctively. Trying to regain posture. Trying to reassert control. But it didn't land the same anymore. Because the men who just walked in weren't looking at him. Not even for a second. Their attention was locked on the older man. They moved directly toward him. Precise. Focused. One of them stepped slightly ahead of the others. "Sir," he said respectfully, "are you all right?" That word, "sir," landed harder than the slap ever did. The officer blinked. Confused. Processing. Trying to catch up. Because something didn't add up. Not at all. The older man nodded slightly. "I'm fine," he replied calmly. Same tone. Same control. Nothing had changed in him. But everything had changed around him. The lead agent turned his head slightly. A subtle signal. The rest of the team adjusted positions instantly. Two near the door. One near the counter. Another watching the officer. Not aggressively, but intentionally. No. They saw him. And that shift. It hit. Hard. The officer felt it immediately. The attention. The evaluation. The silent assessment of everything that had just happened. His throat tightened slightly. "What's going on here?" he said, trying to sound authoritative. But it didn't carry. Not anymore. No one answered him. Not right away. Because this moment wasn't about him anymore. The older man reached calmly into his coat. No sudden movement. No tension. Just a simple, deliberate action. Every eye followed. The officer's posture stiffened. Instinct kicked in. But too late. The man pulled out a leather wallet. Opened it. Turned it slightly. Just enough for the agents to see. Recognition was instant. Clear. Undeniable. The lead agent's posture shifted immediately. Straighter. Sharper. "Understood, sir," he said. Respect. Clear and direct. Then he turned. Finally. Facing the officer. And this time, there was no neutrality. "Officer," he said firmly. "Step back. Now." The command landed with weight. Not loud. But absolute. The kind that doesn't need repetition. The officer hesitated. Just for a second. But that second said everything. Because now, he wasn't in control. Not even close. "What is this?" he said again, voice tighter. "What's happening?" The older man closed his wallet calmly. Then looked directly at him. For the first time since the slap. There was something different in his gaze. Not anger. Not revenge. Authority. Quiet. Unshakable authority. "I'm the chief of FBI Civil Rights," he said. Simple. Clear. Final. The words didn't echo. They landed. Heavy. Permanent. The officer's face changed instantly. Color drained. Eyes widened. Every piece of confidence he had been holding onto collapsed. Right there. In front of everyone. Phones were still recording. Every second. Every reaction. Because now, this wasn't just a confrontation. This was exposure. Reality. Consequence. "You, what?" the officer stammered. But he already knew. Because everything made sense now. The calm. The control. The warnings. The certainty. None of it had been random. None of it had been weakness. It had been restraint. The kind of restraint that comes from knowing exactly who you are. And exactly what's coming next. The lead agent stepped forward again. "Officer, place your hands where we can see them." No aggression. No shouting. Just procedure. The officer didn't move at first. Not because he refused. But because he couldn't process it fast enough. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't how these situations usually ended. He was the authority. He was the one in control. But now, everything had flipped. Completely. The room watched in silence. No whispers now. No movement. Just observation. Because moments like this don't need commentary. They speak for themselves. The officer slowly raised his hands. Small movement. But heavy. Because it wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. The collapse of a moment built on ego. On assumption. On misjudgment. The older man said nothing. Did nothing. He didn't step forward. Didn't demand anything. Didn't even look satisfied. He simply stood there. Composed. Unchanged. Because this was never about proving something. It was about revealing something. And now, that truth was fully exposed. The officer swallowed hard. Eyes flicking between the agents. And the man he had struck. Realization settling in completely. Too late to fix. Too late to undo. Because some mistakes don't come with second chances. And now, he was facing the full weight of one. The cafe remained silent. Not the tense silence from before, but something deeper, heavier, reflective. Because what had just happened wasn't just shocking. It was revealing. The officer stood there, hands still raised. Not resisting. Not speaking. Just standing in the reality of his actions. Moments ago, he had walked in with control. Authority. Confidence. No. All of it was gone. Not taken. Not forced. Lost. Because of one decision. One moment where emotion replaced judgment. Where power was used, without control. Across the room, people were still watching. Phones lowered now. Not because the moment wasn't important anymore. But because it had already said everything. No one needed to record what came next. This part was human. The older man looked at the officer. Long. Quiet. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. But with something far more uncomfortable. Disappointment. He took a slow step forward. The agents didn't stop him. Didn't need to. Because his presence alone controlled the situation. He stood in front of the officer now. Close enough to speak without raising his voice. "You had every chance to walk away," he said calmly. The officer lowered his eyes. Not in obedience, but in realization. "I tried to give you that chance," the man continued. A pause. Still no response. Because there was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to defend. The truth didn't need debate. It was already clear. The man glanced briefly around the cafe. At the people. At the witnesses. Then back at the officer. Respect isn't something you turn on and off, he said. His voice steady. Clear. It's not based on a badge. A small pause. Or a title. The words landed softly. But deeply. Because everyone in that room understood them. Not just as a statement. But as a lesson. The officer swallowed. Still silent. Still unable to meet his eyes. And in that moment, he looked smaller. Not physically, but internally. Because ego had collapsed. And all that was left was consequence. The older man didn't raise his voice. Didn't insult him. Didn't humiliate him. Because he didn't need to. The situation had already done that. Instead, he stepped back slightly. Creating space again. Returning control to the moment. I don't want revenge, he said. And that line shifted everything once more. Because it wasn't expected. Not after everything that had happened. Not after the slap. Not after the disrespect. But it was real. I want understanding, he added. A pause. Long enough for it to sink in. Because if you only respect people when you're forced to. He looked directly at him now. Then you never understood respect at all. The words stayed in the air. No noise. No interruption. Just meaning. The lead agent stepped slightly closer. Waiting. Not rushing. Giving space for the moment to finish. Because even they understood. This part mattered. More than the arrest. More than the procedure. This was the lesson. The officer finally spoke. His voice low. Almost unrecognizable from before. I didn't know, he said. A weak sentence. But honest. The older man nodded slightly. I know, he replied. And that response was heavier than anger could ever be. Because it removed the excuse. And left only responsibility. He turned slightly, preparing to leave the moment behind. But paused. Just for a second. Without looking back, he said one final line. Next time, don't wait to find out who someone is before you treat them right. Then he walked toward the exit. Composed. Exactly the same as when he entered. The agents followed. Silent. Professional. The door opened. Closed. And just like that, the moment ended. But the impact didn't. Inside the cafe, no one spoke immediately. Because everyone had felt it. Not just the tension. Not just the shock. But the truth behind it. That respect isn't earned by power. It's shown through character. And sometimes, the biggest lessons come from the smallest moments. Handled the wrong way, if you believe respect should be given to everyone, no matter who they are, comment, respect. And be honest. What would you have done in that moment?